Hey everyone, Happy New Year, and we want to say Happy New Year and welcome to the very first Radiotopia Presents of 2024. It's a series that we are truly excited about. It's called Shocking, Heartbreaking, Transformative. Now, this is from documentarian Jess Shane, who put out an open call on Craigslist and then worked with 4 strangers to explore the standard rules that documentarians and journalists use to tell their subject stories. So this series gets into all sorts of questions about what happens when people's real lives are collected, edited, and consumed. The show pulls back the curtain on what goes on behind the scenes of your favorite nonfiction shows. And then it turns in on itself and some really interesting twists and turns along the way in the making of the show. I've gotten to know Jess a little bit over the making of this show. Every time I chat with her, there's a new wrinkle to this story. It is really incredible. So go check out the new Radiotopia Presents series, Shocking, Heartbreaking, Transformative. It is out now on your favorite podcast platform. Hello and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avergan. This day, April 8th, 1986, a man by the name of Clint Eastwood. I sometimes do that in the intro. This is not an obscure person. Everyone knows who Clint Eastwood is. The very famous actor, Clint Eastwood. He takes a political turn. He defeats the incumbent Charlotte Townsend to become the mayor of Carmel, which is a small seaside city sort of south of San Francisco near Monterey. This is in his home state of California. This sort of launches a political career. Not really. We'll get into why Eastwood wanted to become the mayor, but it certainly, I think, gives us an opportunity to talk about Clint Eastwood and his politics over the years. He has been a political figure, if not a elected official in the decades since. So here to discuss are, as always, Nicole Hammer of Columbia and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello.
Hey, Jody.
Hey there.
So I think we got through our Schwarzenegger episode without doing a Schwarzenegger impersonation, and I wonder if we can get through this one without some Clint Eastwood catchphrases, but we'll see. And Schwarzenegger will come up because this is part of the larger conversation about celebrities and politics. But Niki, take us to Carmel, 1986. Why is Clint Eastwood trying to become the mayor of this small, sleepy, kind of wealthy California town?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like he gets involved in the ways that a lot of people get involved, in that he is extremely annoyed. He's annoyed with zoning ordinances and city council that sounds like an overly aggressive homeowners association. And so as you read about this, he's trying to do things on his property that he's not allowed to do. And he wants to change the law so he's allowed to do them. And he decides that the only way he's going to be able to do that is to run for office. And so you read this story and you're kind of like, he's a little sympathetic. I mean, HOAs are terrible, and city councils that act like HOAs, I could see how that would annoy people greatly.
I think annoyance and get off my lawn-ism as a main political driver is a really great theory. Someone should write that.
The town has a lot of ridiculous laws, though. I mean, some of the laws are that, you couldn't sell ice cream. What is that? There are no street signs. All of the mail goes to the local mail post office. I mean, there's some things that are just quite archaic and backward about how Carmel is being run. And so I think he just wants to make it more efficient for those who would like to move closer to the 20th century.
Right. Though he also has, it is this amalgam of living and seeing these ordinances that affect himself. And also, there's some real self-interest here. He wants to develop. And all of this comes down to development, which is at the heart of a lot of our politics. I think certainly in a town like Carmel, which is very wealthy, very secluded, is trying to kind of zone its way into seclusion, but is also filled with people who like to get their way and like to spend their money and build their little Xanadu's or whatever. So, it's this interesting stew. The thing that I'm intrigued by, I've been to Carmel a few times. I've driven through it. I kind of have this picture of it. Its a real name is Carmel-by-the-Sea, and I just think anytime you have a town that has a dash by the dash body of water, whether it's river or sea. Like, you kind of get a picture of the kind of, at least the imagination of the residents, what they want. You know, you can get that sense. But Niki, to that point, like, do you see this as Eastwood has some fundamental libertarian ideas about the role of government, or do you see this as Clint Eastwood wants to build some stuff and get his way on his house?
I mean, I think it's actually a combination of the two. There are no real good guys here, as you're pointing out. Like, there is this, like, he's self-interested, right? He wants to develop. He wants to make more money off of his property. And he's very much driven by that self-interest. At the same time, he has this set of libertarian conservative politics. And so they, as often happens in people's politics, self-interest meets this broader, more noble sense of political ideology. And so he finds ways to make his libertarianism or his self-interested reform something that appeals to many more people. Most people in Carmel might not even want Clint Eastwood to make these developments on his land, but he broadens it out. And as Kellie was saying, he's like, all right, let me develop my land, and here's what I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you the ability to eat ice cream cones on a hot day in the middle of town. And people are like, yeah, that's actually the political party I want to be part of.
Yeah.
But there's so much privilege that's fraught in this. You know, if he was not a celebrity, how much of this change could he have actually made or impacted? I think that is the real question, because it's not like he's actually even doing, you know, deep campaigns. Right. I mean, his campaign is just like some buttons and some bumper stickers, and that's about it.
Right. Well, we're talking about a town of 4,000 people here, and we're talking about a very, very, very famous person, particularly at that point in 1986. So yes, it's the earned media of being a celebrity, and we've never seen that in the year since. So, you know, it was just a blip in time where someone used their celebrity to catapult into Republican politics. One little tidbit, and the sourcing on this is a little unclear. 1986 was, you know, is a little bit of a memory hole at this point, but there is somewhere in this amalgam of reasons that Eastwood gets involved is the fact that he owned a pub in town called the Hog's Breath Inn, which is a wonderful name for an English pub, and he wanted to renovate it, and the zoning laws were getting in the way, and that may have been part of the animating factor here. So he becomes mayor. As we said, he doesn't really campaign much. He doesn't do like national press, but, you know, he wins enough, town of 4,000, to become mayor. And then how does he go about enacting his agenda?
Well, he does do some things that I think, you know, the town is really happy about. You know, for a long time, the town was indebted to him for rescuing a historic animal sanctuary. And he put up a lot of his own money to protect the Mission Ranch from being bulldozed by condo developers. So he's not trying to, you know, create like this new urban developed space. He is trying to protect some of what is so beloved about Carmel-by-the-Sea within the town. And I think people appreciate that about him. But, you know, he also builds up the local library and builds up more public toilets that people can use, and, you know, expands the beaches and the walkways. And so I do think that there are ways in which he's improving the public space just to make it more livable and enjoyable for the people that are there. And I don't think you can be really mad at him for that.
All on a $200 salary, by the way.
Yeah. Which was a big pay cut for him as a Hollywood actor. I think, I mean, what Kellie's saying is exactly right. I mean, you read the list of improvements, and I, as somebody who would be a visitor to a place like Carmel, would really appreciate the public toilets and the beach access, and of course the ice cream cones, which I think is really at the center of this mayoralty. But it also serves his development interest, right? You're keeping much of the character of the town, but you're making it much more friendly to tourists. And a lot more tourists come to see the town that has Clint Eastwood as its mayor.
I mean, there's such a fraught and complicated conversation around zoning and housing and NIMBYism and YIMBYism and all that stuff. And this, you know, butts up against a lot of those things. Mm-hmm. But certainly if you paint the picture of like what a quote unquote celebrity mayor could have done, you know, it does seem like Eastwood was just, relatively practical, relatively focused on the little stuff. And I think part of that is, which I think is, if we start to broaden into a bigger conversation about celebrities and politics, it genuinely doesn't seem like he had ambitions beyond this. He does not seem to have political ambitions. He just wants to kind of do a few things in his hometown.
Yeah. I will say it would have been different if after this he ran for the Senate, like he was like, governor, that's what I'm doing next. But I think he just wanted to make some changes in the town in which he lived and saw that this is what needed to be done in order to do it and saw that he could do it. So he did.
And there were a lot of examples at the time of actors who entered politics who went in very different ways, right? It's 1986. Ronald Reagan is in the White House. Clint Eastwood meets with Reagan, who calls him after his big victory on election night in Carmel-by-the-Sea. So there is also just this kind of cohort of actors turned politicians. And so many of them had much, much bigger ambitions. And so Eastwood stands out in a way because he's like, this 2-year term as mayor, I got what I wanted, and now I'm done, and I'm going to go back to making my movies.
Yeah. So here is the big interesting thing I realized as I was, well, you tell me if it's interesting. Here's the big thing I realized as I was looking into this and thinking about celebrities and politicians. So many of them, from my read, tend to be Republicans, which is not what you would expect, right? Celebrities, actors, we tend to think of them as pretty liberal, but there's Reagan, there's Eastwood, there's Schwarzenegger, there's Sonny Bono. All of those are just in California, so maybe there's some interesting California Republican thing going on there. But then you have like Jesse Ventura, Fred Thompson, Linda McMahon, and of course Donald Trump, all Republicans. There are some Democrats, like Al Franken, Kal Penn, but it is funny if you start to rattle off the names of celebrities who get into politics, it's Republicans. And I have some like half-baked theories about that, but I'm curious what you think.
Well, I'm super interested in your half-baked theories.
I know. I was like, what are your theories? Do tell.
Like, California was a Republican state for a good chunk of time. And we're also talking about very wealthy people, and very wealthy people do tend to trend Republican.
Yes, though I also think that, for instance, here, Clint Eastwood takes a $200 salary, right? And he doesn't make movies anymore. I mean, I think that to some extent there's, for some very wealthy people, getting into politics is a step down in terms of financials. That's not to say that that's why Democrats in California haven't gotten into it. I mean, I think part of it is just about, if you just think about kind of power and political capital in a larger cultural sense, a lot of celebrities in Hollywood who lean left, as many of them do, probably feel like they have a voice, they have power, they have so forth. And Republicans, especially Republicans in Hollywood, probably feel aggrieved and like they and silenced and like they have to find other levers to pull, and then they maybe actually turn to actual politics. But that's my half-baked theory.
No, that's a good theory.
I would say that's at least 3/4 baked.
That's edible. I mean, it's interesting. Clint Eastwood does say he's not going to take on any roles. He's getting paid, I think, $6 million a film. He does do 2 films while in office, but he flies back each time for the meeting, so he's committed to the job. But I do think it's interesting that he never aspired to anything else after this, because I think it set a precedent that he probably could. And 2, that while he was in office, he was still committed to doing the work. I think the stereotype is that, you'll just get the job and then you'll sort of rest on your laurels. And he doesn't do that.
Yeah. None of this is to underplay the fact that Eastwood has been a political presence in the decades since. And so I wonder if we can just end on that. And Niki, you're our watcher of GOP circles and GOP media. So kind of what is your sense of what Eastwood has meant and what kind of conservatism he has articulated, in the decades since?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's still in conservative circles as a touchstone, as somebody who is a big advocate of guns, which is one way that he's often held up in many conservative circles, and is just like, as you were talking about earlier, one of our own. Even though there are a lot of Republican actors who become politicians, they are points of pride as celebrities because they're seen as such rarities. But I don't think that we can conclude this conversation without talking about 2012 and the Republican National Convention, when Mitt Romney, looking for some real star power, I mean, he'd already won the endorsement of Donald Trump, so he had some of the star power on his side, but he invites Clint Eastwood to give remarks at the Republican National Convention, and nobody thought to figure out what he was going to say. And I think that they were expecting a little bit more of the 1986 Clint Eastwood, and instead they got the 2012 Clint Eastwood, who spent his entire time yelling at an empty chair, pretending it was Barack Obama, which was probably the weirdest thing I've ever seen at a convention. And I'm actually going to include the Trump convention in
Wow.
this. It was
Bold
really weird.
It was awkward. It was the epitome of awkward.
Yes.
And I just remember watching like, oh my God, what is happening? Like it was, even the jokes were not funny. It was low key racist. There was so much about it that was problematic, that I feel like, we kind of always knew that Clint Eastwood was this way, but I think seeing it on the stage like that was so disturbing.
I'm really glad you brought that up. You have to bring it up when you're talking about Clint Eastwood in politics. We'll leave it in. I will also say I think there's a 2-hour special podcast for us to be done about that moment. We will find a moment to do that. I have many thoughts.
I've got a lot more to say.
Oh, yeah. The yelling at the empty chair is perfect for us. We should do a proper episode about that.
What day was that?
There's a convention in the summer.
man.
We will do it. We will absolutely do it because, I have some, I think it's a very interesting moment. But final thought kind of as we think about Eastwood himself, he's one of these filmmakers also, like his films in the decades since have really had this political bent to him. They run the gamut from like uber patriotic to there's actually one I think, a lot of Gran Torino is literally about just kind of like, get off my lawn.
Yeah.
I think it's plainly obvious that a lot of left-leaning filmmakers kind of imbue their films with their values, their liberal values, as any artist does. And I think Eastwood is probably the best example of someone who has done the same on the right. And that's a huge part of his cachet, is that just thought that like we have not just someone who goes out there and goes to conventions and goes on Fox News, but we have someone kind of in the Hollywood machine making these films that are pushing forward some of the values for conservatism.
He's like Charleston Heston. I mean, I put them in the same category.
Yeah.
I actually sometimes confuse the two of them. So thank you for bringing that up, Kelly.
Not unreasonable. But Niki, look, Eastwood is very old right now. He's 90 years old, although he made films very recently. But like, is he... I don't know this. You're the one who has to listen to all this stuff on our behalf. But like, was he in the Limbaugh circles? Was he making appearances on radio? Was he like calling in the way that like Trump was kind of just like in the stew?
Nah, he wasn't really a fixture of conservative media. He wasn't somebody who would turn up on Fox News. And I think that's why it was such a surprise when he came out in the 2012 convention and acted like someone who was yelling at his television, because he didn't have that reputation, and he just didn't have that he didn't have that background. And still doesn't. Like, he's not calling into Tucker Carlson, right?
Yeah.
He has a different profile.
Great. Okay, well, let's leave it there. That was really fascinating. Nicole Hammer, thanks to you as always.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
This Day in Esoteric Political History is a proud member of Radiotopia from PRX, a network of independent, listener-supported, artist-owned podcasts. Our researcher and producer is Jacob Feldman. Our producer is Brittany Brown. Kala Nakua helps with our transcripts, which you can find at our website, thisdaypod.com. Also on our website is a way to get in touch with us and a way to support the show directly if you would like. You can become a monthly member or you can give a one-time donation. Thank you so much for doing that. Follow us on social media. We're at thisdaypod on Instagram and Twitter. My name is Jody Avirgan. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you soon.
Carmel is slowly adjusting to his high-profile mayor, and while he may be unable to control Eastwood gawkers and the Main Street's traffic problems, he is making changes.
All right. Can we have the roll call, please?
Ice cream cones once banned are back. There are more public restrooms. The library is getting a new annex. And the Planning Commission has been revamped. Eastwood fired the 4 members who opposed him. Mayor Clint has taken control.
Radiotopia.